Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right. And because when we try to do so many different things, we really don't excel in anything. And I also look at it this way. If somebody looks at me and says, oh my gosh, you build profitable personal brands, like, yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who've just built these pretty brands over here, but nobody really focuses on actually making money with the brand. You're exactly who I've been looking for. Okay. That sounds very different from, oh, you do some branding and some graphic design and some copywriting and all these various different things and some marketing. So does everybody else, right? So you've got to set yourself apart from the very beginning. And one of the ways you do that is to decide, this is what I stand for. And these are exactly the kind of people I help, because only then can they look at you and say, oh, that's perfect. You're exactly what I was looking for. You can't, that will not happen if you are stretched too thin.
I just wrapped up my conversation with Tonya Eberhart and Michael Carr, and they have a really interesting start to their partnership. Ultimately, Tonya ended up helping Michael build his personal brand, and his business bloomed as a result. So they ultimately decided to end up working together. And we discussed a lot of interesting stuff, in particular about why building a personal brand is so important in today's day and age when you're really trying to differentiate yourself among the crowd and filter through all that noise out there. And ultimately, what you can do today to start building your personal brand. And I think that one of the biggest takeaways from this episode, which was really interesting, is that people will meet your brand before they get to meet you. So you should really start focusing on how can you build your personal brand in order to stand out. Overall, a really great conversation and a ton of value for anyone really trying to grow their business and their brand out there. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Tonya and Michael. Tonya and Michael, how are we doing, guys?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Fantastic, Daniel. Happy to be here.
Doing incredible and really excited to have you guys, especially because you guys are the personal branding experts and something that's super important and really prevalent today with a lot of the stuff that we're seeing on social media and really how people are able to differentiate themselves and build their voices online, especially kind of in today's day and age with what's going on. But before I get into all of that, I want to ask a question that probably the audience is most curious about when they're seeing two people on the screen. How did your guys' partnership start?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question, Daniel. I was actually had a full service marketing agency, and my aunt is actually one of Michael's real estate agents.
Small world.
And
A founding agent.
Yeah, a founding agent for the brokerage. And she introduced us in a rather underhanded way, actually. She would say to me, Tonya, Michael is expecting your call. You need to call him. He needs help with marketing. And she would say the same to Michael. Michael, Tanya's expecting your call. I told her that she would be helping you with marketing. And so finally, she kept doing that for weeks. And finally, I just picked up the phone one day and called Michael and said, hey, I don't know if I'm supposed to be calling you or you're supposed to be calling me, but hey, here we are. Let's have a chat and see where we go from here. And then I'll let you pick up from there because the rest is ugly.
So I did have a brokerage. It was founded by Miss Carolyn and I. And so she said, my marketing stinks and I need to talk to Tonya. I just kept putting her off because I'd heard all that before. So when Tonya called me, I was like, I think I was nicer than this, but that story has evolved to I've had 5 others just like you and I don't need another one. I was wrong about that. I had never met anybody like her. All the marketing agents prior to her were not any of that, and she was all of that and more. And so I really put her through about 2 more weeks of grueling questions, and finally she just in frustration said, "Look, you're just going to have to trust I know what I'm doing, and hire me or don't hire me." And I said, well, I was going to hire you 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to make it a little bit harder on you. And I was in San Bernardino, California when that happened. She was in Columbus, Ohio. And the brokers was in Atlanta, Georgia. So we started that partnership there. And then I learned very quickly that she had sold me marketing and she taught me branding. And it was an eye opener. I'd been in business 20 years and it was transformative. It literally turned our brokerage overnight into a success. And we've been gaining every year since then. based on the principles that we'll talk about here today. And then I was lucky enough, she asked me to be a co-writer on the second book, directed specifically at real estate, and then the co-writer on one for all entrepreneurs, including authors, speakers, podcasters, things that we've moved into, genres that we've moved into. And then she asked me to be a partner in the company, and I did. And then I asked her to be my wife, and she said yes. And so that's how we're still on
There you got our whole history in 5 minutes, Daniel.
That's awesome. And it sounds like it was meant to be from day one. So really great that she was able to help you build that brokerage. And I like how you told her, or I like how she at some point told you, look, like, you're either going to hire me or not. Like, let's get this thing done. Because I think a lot of times, we have to draw that line in the sand. So I thought really great marketing trick on there. Tonya, I want to get into a little bit more specifically with your story. I know when you were in college, you actually sold vacuum cleaners door to door. Just selling door to door, I mean, especially these days, is probably impossible, but way back then, certainly still difficult. What did you learn while kind of selling that stationary product while you were doing it?
Well, first thing is it sucked on 2 levels, right?
Yeah,
Nobody
right.
wants to go door to door. And the vacuum cleaner did do pretty well, right? So, actually, Daniel, that's where the first taste of personal branding came to me. And I didn't even really know what it was called back then. I didn't know the term personal branding, but I did realize very quickly that I was just going to get a lot of doors slammed in my face if I didn't give them a reason to let me inside beyond, hey, you're going to buy this today or not, right? It doesn't always work like that. So I learned to tell the story. Hey, I'm just a college student working my way through college. And, even if you don't buy anything, I still get points for, demonstrating this, which I sort of did, but it was sort of kind of a fib at the same time. But it got me into a lot of doors, and I ended up selling a lot of vacuum cleaners, enough to pay my way through school for about 3 years before I was discovered by somebody in the radio industry.
That's awesome. So more specifically, one of those things I know that you learned was, and you kind of alluded to this, was how to tell a story. And obviously, to be a great salesperson, you have to be a great storyteller. So naturally, I want to ask, what makes a great story?
Oh, fantastic
Great
question.
question.
Yeah. I think number one, an honest journey, to share an honest journey. Yeah, because people want to connect with the person beyond the professional. They were, and I'll take that to the next level to better answer that question. So when I was approached by somebody in the radio industry, and they said, "Hey, you should try out, or you should come in and apply for a sales position," I did, and fast forward 18 years later, I was still in the media world. But right away in media, I noticed that those doors that were getting slammed in my face were just slammed harder with lots more commas and zeros behind them. So right away, I knew I had another job to do. I had to differentiate myself in that space now. And so in that space, to tell the story, I had to figure out, like, you really have to work and look at, what is your story? Like, where have you come from, and why are you doing what you're doing? Well, I didn't really have a lot of that sophisticated stuff back then, like most of us have when we're 10, 15 years into it. I was just like, hey, I'm new here. I don't even know what to do, right? But I knew one thing. I knew that if I wanted people to view me differently, I needed to change the way I presented myself. And so part of that was proving to them that even though I was barely 20 years old, I had the goods. I could take a look at their situation. I had this marketing mind, and I could take a look at their situation and say, oh, okay, I can see why those commercials you're running right now aren't working. So how about we look at this a totally different way? And so I became one of the first radio salespeople in the country to actually have my own website. I began to drop flyers off that were really focused on what I could do for the client, not all the, accomplishments that I had at the time, because I really didn't have any. My accomplishment was, hey, look at what I can do for you. And it turns out that's actually the best story. Here's a part of my journey, but here's what I have learned, and here's why I can help you with what I've learned. And that, to me, makes the best story.
So you were really able to kind of start, pun intended, branding yourself through kind of showing
Yes.
people who you were, and that's ultimately what got them connected with you.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that you mentioned was that you really got in tuned with yourself and kind of trying to be authentic with how you're presenting yourself. And I think oftentimes today, a big mistake people make is they're trying to be jack of all trades, master of none. So, as simple as it sounds, why do you think that people have trouble kind of figuring out who their authentic self is and really creating that brand?
Honestly, I think a lot of it is because we can do so many things, it's very difficult to make the decision on what we really should be doing. I have this saying that I came up with years ago, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right. And because when we try to do so many different things, we really don't excel in anything. And I also look at it this way. If somebody looks at me and says, "Oh my gosh, you build profitable personal brands," like, yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who've just built these pretty brands over here, but nobody really focuses on actually making money with the brand. You're exactly who I've been looking for. Okay, that sounds very different from, oh, you do some branding and some graphic design and some copywriting and all these various different things and some marketing. So does everybody else, right? So you've got to set yourself apart from the very beginning. And one of the ways you do that is to decide, this is what I stand for, and these are exactly the kind of people I help, because only then can they look at that at you and say, oh, that's perfect. You're exactly what I was looking for. You can't, that will not happen if you are stretched too thin.
I love that. Trying to take some time and really think about what your values are and the services you're trying to offer, because then you can present your full self. So, speaking of that, Michael, I know when you were Tanya's client and when you finally hired her after, giving her all that hard time, as you mentioned earlier, what was step one when she really helped you rebrand yourself?
What was the point when she actually did?
Like what
Is
was
that what
what
you?
was the exact like what was the step one? How did she get you on that path toward rebranding yourself and becoming really an authority with your
Got you,
firm?
got you. I just wanted to be sure I understood it. It was through the interview process. She did a very extensive interview process. We did it both by phone. She actually flew to Atlanta to interview more with me, see my office, meet the office staff, do the videos that at that time were not really prevalent. People were doing them, but not like we do today. Like, this is 8 versions of the iPhone ago, right? And so it wasn't done as much. And I was very awkward at it because I had never really done it, even though I had been on stage. I'd been on every major news station in the United States and abroad during the mortgage debacle. So I was comfortable in front of cameras, but nobody was ever focused on me, like what Michael was doing and why he was doing that. So definitely the turning point was her interview process and learning why I did what I did, where I was going, what my experience level was, to start to craft that story that you asked about earlier.
So, after that interview process and after Tanya helped you really identify how you wanted to go to market and personally brand yourself, what differences did you notice from prospective clients after you came with that new identity?
It was immediate. It was near immediate. The brokerage is in a very small town north of Atlanta, not far from actually where I grew up, and not far really where she grew up too. We grew up about 45 minutes away from each other and never knew each other until, many states later and almost a couple of lives later, right? And so,
Yeah.
but it was a small town, and so it was pretty easy to make a big splash, and nobody else had approached it the way she had. And so I saw within a month of us really putting the marketing out there, I was in a restaurant and was checking out, and the lady's like, "Are you the Michael Carr?" And I was like, "I've never been the anything. Yeah, I am a Michael Carr." Like, and she goes, "No, the one that's in real estate." And so I knew like instantly, like this resonated with the people, the message, the story that she was putting out. And I didn't even have a concept. I didn't have a grasp on it yet at all. I thought, oh, well, she's seen a video that Tanya shot, or she's, seen some kind of messaging, but I didn't understand yet. I was still learning what she was teaching. And then I learned later on it was because that story was personal and it resonated with people. There's no shortage of real estate agents back then in the small town of Jefferson, and there's 10 times more than that now. And we're still number one because of that resonating story that I do what I do for you. and I can make a difference in your life. And I'm different than everybody else because of this, 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 and this. And I didn't realize she was putting all that together, but she was just asking me questions like, why do you do what you do? What do you enjoy? What about the job do you like? She was building that persona and pulling it out of me at the same time, I might add, because I never thought I'd be a real estate broker. I've had a broker's license. At that time, I had it 14 years when I met her. And I've been in the business for nearly 20. No, over 20 at that time. And so I, but I never thought, well, I'm going to build a brokerage and then I'm going to be the broker and then I'm going to train these other agents the things that I have learned over 30 years of doing it. I would have never told you that I was going to do that until she pulled it out of me. And I can tell you now, I live the life I've always dreamed of by doing that. So she unveiled that. She had a client tell her one time, Tonya, can you make me into a star? And she said, I don't make stars, I unveil them. And I feel like that's sort of what she did for our company. She unveiled the real purpose of why we do what we do. And then we were able to teach that to other people.
I love that. And I love how you frame that as unveiling stars, because maybe we all have that star and it's not becoming that, but it's really unveiling it. So
We believe that
beautiful.
for sure.
For sure. So on a similar note, and definitely how Tonya helped you, there are a lot of companies and individuals out there, as you mentioned, that offer similar products, similar services. In addition to interviewing and kind of trying to figure out, what do you think step one should be for them when they're really trying to differentiate themselves via their personal brand?
Is that directly to me or to either one of us?
To either one of you, feel free. It's a two-person answer, one person, whatever the flow may go.
Perfect. Okay, I'll take this, and then Michael can follow up. But so the number one thing to really look at when you're trying to differentiate yourself is there some process or way that you do things that is very, very different? Here's an example for you. There's a gentleman who came out of Keller Williams. He'd been with Keller Williams for almost 30 years, I think. And he was responsible for helping to build their BOLD training program that almost 180,000 agents went through. And he left that to start his own thing to become an entrepreneur. And he was doing some tax consulting and business consulting. And he has a very exclusive method that he uses. And I said, hey, Pat, that method that you're using, is that somebody else's? Did you learn it somewhere or did you create it? Or he said, no, I created it. It's actually all of the steps that I use. I created those. And I said, wow, why don't we call this the Mancuso method? Because Mancuso was his last name, Pat Mancuso. So let's call it the Mancuso method. It's one more way to set you apart from everyone else and really achieve that thought leader status that you're looking for in this new space. And so we did that, and that's just one way. So look at, first of all, differentiation can come in many forms. You can look at exactly the type of people that you're serving, because if it's really niched down, that can be a point of differentiation for you. If the way you serve is unique, that is your point of differentiation. If your attributes are a big part of what you're known for, like maybe you're a humorous person, and there's a gentleman here in I can't remember, the Lawrenceville area or somewhere. He's a car dealer. He wears crazy pants. Absolutely nuts, like the most colorful, crazy pants ever, right? But people know him for that because he's an outlandish personality, and that becomes one of the things that really differentiates him. I'm sure there are a lot more that differentiate him and make him amazing in the car space, right? Because you can't just wear funny pants and expect to be a thought leader, right? But that's the one thing that people notice first, and then add to that, the specialties that make him, unique the rest of the way. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful there. And you guys have a mantra actually that I thought was really interesting. It's called change how you're seen and charge what you're worth. So on that note, I know we've spoken a lot about personal branding, but sometimes, if we don't focus on it, the brand can kind of create itself in a way that we don't want. So what I mean by that is people perceive us not in the way that we intended. So is there any kind of way that where we can do something to change the perception of our brand or of our company to be more perceived towards the way that we want to be perceived?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, your brand should answer 5 questions, right? Who you serve, how you serve them, what qualifies you to serve them, how it makes their life better, and then what makes you different in that space. So everybody should approach that with trying to answer those questions to get that answer in the focus that they're going on.
Yeah.
And because that's the key of it. It's to our clients, it only matters to them, right? So like in real estate, I've been involved with well over 81,000 residential transactions. Really, it's a lot more than that if you count states that I brokered that I never was in. They physically while we were selling them, but nonetheless, why is that important to my real estate clients? Only from experience level. The braggadocious part of that, hey, I've had so many that doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? Because they're interested in the next house they're buying. And so the only reason that is even important is because I have the experience of that many transactions. So I'm going to see pitfalls that you're not going to see, that regular agents, like your normal brokerage agents, aren't going to see, because I've already seen that scenario 1,000 times. Let me tell you how to stay out of that. Don't do that. Don't go that direction. Go this direction. And so that's important to the person because they're interested in that one house that they're trying to buy, right? And so we have to be sure that what we're putting out there isn't just our accolades. It has to be that personal side also. Why is that important to you? What qualified me to teach you that? This is how I'm different in my approach. And really a very important one is going to make your life better by doing business with us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I find too, Daniel, that, there are a lot of companies out there and individuals with personal brands that don't do what Michael just said. They don't have all that really dialed in. And therefore, it means that they're viewed just like everybody else in their space. So it's just like, oh, well, there's a million real estate agents, right? Or there's a million coaches and consultants. There's a million of this. But when you set yourself apart, you're able to charge what you're worth. We look back in the last couple of years of our clientele, most of our clients charge now 60% more than they were charging coming into our program, because they're now branded and that they are now specialized. It's kind of like the difference between a general practitioner and a gastroenterologist, right? One of those is going to make a lot more money because they're specialized, meaning their patients feel like they were especially made for them. Mm-hmm. And that makes all the difference.
And I can give you a scenario of real life based on our business model here at the real estate office. So we never wanted to be big numbers as far as agents, right? We want the right agents. And so what we look for when we interview is not just anybody that has a real estate license. We look for people that want to elevate their craft. And so we have a boutique brokerage with 25 agents. Out of that 25 agents, 11 of them are professionally branded. All right. So they have the story that we just articulated, the 5 questions that every brand should ask. People don't do business with a logo. They do business with a person. Those other things that Tonya has coined in the past. If you take just one of those 11 and you pull out, they do more volume than the other 14 put together, just one of them. So it's like a living proof even in our model as it goes generation 2, generation 3, generation 4, that professionally branded people telling the right story to the right ideal customer with the right message enough times, it will bring you volumes of business that you didn't even expect.
I like how you guys brought up those 5 questions and the fact that you looked for agents who were not only looking to elevate their craft, but also looking to build a personal brand. So looking at the other side, it may be something that's a bit of a harder task. Obviously, when someone's a blank canvas, it's easier to paint. But oftentimes, unfortunately, people have brands that are perceived really poorly. So how do you go about reversing a brand that's perceived poorly and making a brand that's perceived as an authority?
Fantastic question.
Great question.
This happens a lot in coaches and consultants, which is the most of who we work with is coaches, consultants, and experts. And the longer you're in it, a lot of people think, well, I've been in this a long time. I've already got my brand, right? Well, what if your brand's going in the wrong direction? Mm-hmm. That's doing you just as much harm as if you just started yesterday and you don't know which way to go. So one of the things that we do is it all begins with going back to those 5 questions. But we also look at, okay, how do you want to be viewed in this space? And I ask 2 questions. First of all, people that know you what do they think about you? How do they feel about you in this space? People that know you, what are some things that they would say about you? And would they say what you would want them to say? And they tell me, well, they say I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. And I think, okay, all right, now stop for a minute. I want to ask you this question. What do you think people would know about, feel about you that don't yet know you? Let's just say I just saw your LinkedIn profile for the first time. Somebody just introduced me to you. I just saw you on a video or read a post that you put on social media. What would people feel or know about you that's out there right now, ahead of you, preceding you, right? And that's the real question, because 98% of people will actually meet your brand before they meet you. Think about that for a minute. Let's say we have 15 meetings this week, Daniel. And out of those 15 meetings, that's awesome. I get to actually sit across from you, whether it's Zoom or across a real table with coffee. I get to know you. You get to know me. We get to know each other. And as a result of that, we get to know a little bit about our brand, which our brand is really just who we are and our reputation, right? But if I don't have that opportunity, so those 15 people I'm meeting with this week, that number pales in comparison to the number of people, hundreds, thousands, or in the hundreds of thousands, that actually receive an email from me, see me on a video, hear me on a podcast, read a blog post, read an article I've written, visit my website, see my social media posts, etc. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on. Those are people who are exposed to my brand before I've ever even had a chance to meet them in person. The real question is, what do those people know about me before they ever even meet me? Mm-hmm. Your brand's number one job is to precede you.
Mm-hmm. And a good example of that is we branded a world record holder that she scaled the second highest peaks on all 7 continents.
Jennifer Drummond. Actually, I had her on the podcast.
Don't you love her?
Yeah.
Don't you love her?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you know what she's trying to get done. Well, it's how do you parlay that kind of talent, that kind of drive into coaching other people to also seek their summit, and on building out that brand to take that perfect story of what she's accomplished and then push it out to the people that are seeking that, are going to need that. Requires that story that you talked about and a brand that's dialed in. You'll never get there with just a logo.
I love how when life comes full circle like that. Yeah, Jennifer's awesome, and she was great to have on the podcast, and certainly can see the branding expertise behind her, the brains behind the brand. So on a slightly different note, a lot of us are probably all biased to an extent. I mean, we're all human. We all think our brand's the best. We all sometimes think we're the best version of ourselves, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. So to make like an objective assessment, what can we really do to test how our brand is perceived?
Oh, wow. Great question. Because we like to say it is hard to read the label when you're the one inside the jar, not something we came up with, but we love the
good
sentiment.
Statement. Good phrase.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what not to do first. Let's do this. Don't ask people who don't know anything about branding. Okay. And the reason for that is they won't understand what you're trying to accomplish because they don't understand. Like if you don't know, then they sure don't know, right? So leaning on the professionals for something like that is really, really important, because it's not just about a logo. Most people, if you ask them, hey, what's a brand? They'll say, well, that's a logo and my brand is BrandFace, right? That's what they'll say. No, BrandFace is the name of the company that you're part of. And your logo is not your brand, right? But most people think those are 2 major factors when it comes to a brand. They're 2 branding elements of a brand, but not the major factors. So leaning on the professionals is really like, there's a million different ways I could answer that, but I would say find somebody who's done it for a long time, who has successfully branded people to become profitable with those brands, and then have them take a look from the outside. I wish it was easier than that, but if you say, oh, I have a really bad tooth, right? Well, you don't know if that's a cavity, if it's a root canal, if your filling broke off, if your tooth just cracked, if you have an infection. I mean, you don't know really any of those things. And you're probably not going to do very well asking your 2 nieces, your uncle, and your nephew, right? That's not going to be helpful to you. You're probably going to need to go see a professional. So probably not what most people wanted to hear, but it's true.
Yeah, I definitely think, and two, there's a litmus test that when you put it out there correctly, it will be parroted back to you. So you will have people contacting you saying things like, I read your profile on LinkedIn. You're exactly who I need to work with. Right. And if those things aren't built out correctly, then you're probably not going to hear those things. You might hear, hey, what can you do for me? But you're not going to hear the magic words that are, I looked you up. You're exactly who I need to work with. When you hear things like that, you know your brand is getting dialed in like it's supposed to.
Definitely. Tanya, I'm actually really happy you brought up that example because I saw a meme recently about that. There was one dentist shop. I forget what kind, or dentist kind of office. I forget out what state it was in, but the name of it was Top Dentist Near Me. And the joke was when you go all in on SEO. So that's one way to make a personal brand. But
I love it.
really,
That's great.
really, really great example. But I mean, it's in all reality, it's a good thing because when something hurts, you're like subconsciously thinking, well, you're consciously thinking, I need to go to the top dentist. I mean, subconsciously, you're looking for the best brand. So definitely something that I think if we're not, consciously or intuitively aware of, I think that kind of guides our behavior. So definitely something that's really important. As we've spoken about, you've gotten a chance to work with a lot of different clients, and I'm sure you have a lot of different client success stories. What would you say is one of your most memorable client stories?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a good you wanna answer this one, Kat?
Kathy's,
I love
she's at
Kathy's.
the top
Yeah.
5 at
Yeah.
least.
Okay, so Kathy Moss is an acclaimed, cowboy poet. She has won the International, Poet of the Year award a couple of different times, and it's just a unique
and
profession,
and
right?
the only author to win best female poet of the year in both Canada and the United States the same year.
Yeah.
Impressive.
So she struggled a lot with confidence issues and actually charging what she was worth, right?
Mm.
And so we literally just came off of a session with her. We do profit sessions with a lot of our clients, and we're working with her now to really help her, learn how to present herself in such a way that she doesn't even have to worry about asking for the money. It's assumed, right? Because she has earned that right. And now her brand presents her so much more powerfully. So I know when we first started working with her, she was painfully shy and she was really struggling hard with asking for the money. And when she did ask for the money, it was a pitiful low dollar amount, right? And well, at least we thought it was, right? Because we're going to be very honest with her about that. She's such a wonderful lady. But what happened as a result of us working with her is we were probably only 2.5 weeks into the mastermind that Kathy was in with us,
Mm-hmm.
and we were building her brand. And she brought a situation to us, and we helped her get 3 times more money than she had ever asked for before in the very first deal that she negotiated while being branded at the same time.
Yeah, she had the goods. She
She
wasn't
did.
good at articulating the value.
Yeah.
And then
And
she
she
had
did.
the brand and she was getting the calls and she didn't know how to stand on her guns and say, I'm worth this money.
Yeah.
And
And her brand really didn't present herself at that level at the time. Like when Michael says she had the brand, like if you see her at a entertainment venue or something and you see her performing, it's like it's obvious this woman's got the goods. She's amazing, right? But as we talked about earlier, 98% of people actually meet your brand before they meet you. What was out there preceding her was not as powerful as she was.
Right.
And that's the real key in it. We had that option. Now that she was presenting herself so much more powerfully, it became so much easier to actually secure that money that she was asking for.
It's beautiful. I've never heard of a cowboy poet before, so that's definitely, a good starting
Yeah.
point. But awesome that you guys were able to really help her gain that confidence and build that brand and charge what she was worth. So we've spoken a lot about, as I said earlier, building a personal brand, some mistakes people can make, and some of those 5 questions. But I want to ask on a parting note here, if you had to boil down all of your knowledge into one piece of advice when it comes to building a personal brand, what would that piece of advice be?
Okay, so on my side of things, it would be, and I hear this from a lot of branding people, oh, your customer in the end, your customer is going to really decide what your brand is in the end. And I hate that
Yeah.
statement, right? So I would say you have an obligation to make your brand as powerful as you. So if you don't really know how to do that, seek the help in doing that. But you deserve it is what I would say. You really do deserve to charge what you're worth. You deserve to have a presence that is as wonderful and powerful as you are, because we already know that there's a star inside of all of us. It's just unveiling that and getting it out there in such a way that you feel proud of it and you feel proud of yourself, and you feel happy and excited to put the brand out there. Because when you know that it's truly authentically you, just this awesome, a version of you out there that's as awesome as you are, right? That gives you so much confidence.
Mm-hmm. And mine would be bold with it. You got to put it out there. It's like Tonya said, you can build a brand all day long. If you don't tell anybody, if you don't share it, if you don't put it out there like you're supposed to, if you don't display it, it's like throwing a birthday party and not sending out invites and then wondering why nobody's there.
Yep. Tonya and Michael, history definitely rewards the bold, and you guys are certainly bold with a lot of the things that you've done and the way that you've been helping people. Really, thanks so much for all that value, and thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you, Daniel. What a pleasure.